Richard Riakporhe moves to 14-0 with an 8th round knockout over Deion Jumah. This was a competitive fight. Jumah was outboxing and outworking Richard Riakporhe at times in there. Riakporhe showed improvement, and he's actually been improving over his past few fights because he had previously been very tense in the ring, and not only was the tension evident in his movements, but even in his facial expressions. He seemed very tense. He was grimacing a lot of the times in previous fights when he was throwing punches, and some people could say that maybe down to injuries or something like that, but I don't think it's just that, if it was that at all. I think that he was so tense and there was so much anxiety in him that it manifested in a grimacing face and really labored movements when he's punching and so on. In this fight here, he was less tense and he did a good job at setting Deion Jumah up for the right hand, which landed in the 4th round to score the first knockdown. Jumah was, it's the first time I've seen him fight. Some people call him a slick southpaw. I wouldn't necessarily call him slick. I'll call him more awkward, but I guess it depends on your definition of slick. But personally, for me, someone who's slick is not just difficult to hit, defensively good, but also fluid. And with Deion Jumah, he's not really a fluid fighter. There's kind of a disjointed nature to his movement. It's a bit, I don't know how to describe it, herky-jerky slightly. It's all a bit strange the way Deion Jumah moves. His body mechanics are a little odd. And this is going to sound weird in itself, but in terms of his body mechanics, he almost reminds me a little bit of Jean-Marc Mormec. And I know Jean-Marc Mormec is not a slick fighter, never was. He was more of a pressure fighter. But, and again, Deion Jumah isn't like Jean-Marc Mormec in that regard, but just in terms of his body mechanics, the way his body moves, it reminds me of Jean-Marc Mormec. So yeah, Jumah is kind of a awkward southpaw, not necessarily slick, but definitely awkward. He was throwing a lot of punches, as I say, outworking Richard Riakporhe in there and doing a fairly good job of scoring his shots and getting out of the way of Riakporhe's shots until, like I say, the 4th round, where he got a bit too greedy. That's a phrase that people like to use in boxing. He got a bit too greedy. He was really trying to press the action actually at that point because he felt like he could land almost at will on Richard Riakporhe. Now, his punches weren't necessarily landing clean. Some were sneaking round the guard and through the guard, but they were mostly at least partially blocked. But yeah, like I say, he got a bit too comfortable in there. He started landing more and more on Riakporhe and actually being quite aggressive. And Riakporhe managed to catch him when I think Jumah was throwing a left, and then Riakporhe came across with a right hook, which dropped Deion Jumah heavily. He got up to his feet, even though it was a heavy knockdown and, it sent the spit flying. He wasn't out of it when he got to his feet. His powers of recovery seemed quite good. And in the following rounds, 5, 6, 7, he mounted a comeback and he was once again outboxing and outworking Richard Riakporhe in spots in there. But then in the 8th round, Richard Riakporhe landed a right to the solar plexus of Deion Jumah, and down he went. He was crawling across the canvas, but he was unable to beat the count. Actually, did he beat the count or did the ref? I forget now. I only just watched the fight this morning, but for the second time this morning. I watched it live when it happened, but I also watched it this morning as well. But regardless of that, the fight was over because of that body shot. So overall, I would say it was a good performance by Richard Riakporhe. I'd never seen Jumah fight before. I saw improvements there from Riakporhe, but there are still deficiencies, and I'm going to talk about them. First of all, Riakporhe doesn't get good extension on his right hand. It's always kind of almost always a bent arm shot. It's quite rare to see him get full extension on it. And for a guy who's 6'5", you'd really want to see full extension on it. I don't know if there's some kind of injury or some kind of problem, or maybe that's just the way he's made. He struggles to get full extension on the right hand. But what that means is that a shorter guy like Jumah is able to get close to him because he's not keeping him on the end of the shots, And Jumah was able to get in close, do his work, dip this way, dip that way, get around him, etc. A guy who knows how to use his reach effectively is not going to let a shorter man like that get anywhere close enough to be able to land consecutive shots and combinations and what have you. Whereas Richard Riakporhe doesn't seem to have that extension on his right hand. When you're fighting a southpaw, it can be difficult to land your own jab, so I'll let him off with regards to that. But this is not the first time that I've seen Richard Riakporhe struggle to keep people at bay. So yeah, that's one of the criticisms I'll have of him. And again, it's constructive criticism. I got nothing against the guy. Doesn't get the extension. Also, he's not the fastest cruiserweight in the world. He's quite methodical, quite one-paced. Doesn't have tremendous hand speed or anything like that. Also, he is a bit on the stiff side. You know, he's not the most fluid fighter you've ever seen. So there's things to work on. He did actually say himself in one of the post-fight interviews, I think it was with IFL, that he was fighting too tall in this fight and that he felt like he needed to actually fight a bit lower, you know, bend at the waist, bend his knees a bit more. So obviously he's looking at his performance and thinking, where can I improve? What things did I do wrong? And that's obviously a good thing, because if you're not scrutinizing your own performances, then you're not going to improve. So yeah, those are the things that I would criticize. And like I say, he is a bit one-paced, he is a bit upright, a bit robotic at times, but he does have power, okay? The right hand might not be straight and he might not have the distance in that right hand that you would imagine, but it's still very, very powerful when it does land. And his timing was pretty good. Yeah, he missed the right hand quite a few times, but he was patient. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Deontay Wilder's performance against Luis Ortiz. Now, Riakporhe wasn't that negative. Wilder really threw nothing. I'm talking about the Ortiz rematch. Wilder really threw nothing until the knockout shot, which landed in, what was it, the 6th or 7th round? Riakporhe was more busy than that, but it was a similar kind of thing where he was just waiting for his opportunity to land a perfect shot on Jumah. He wasn't really trying that much to keep up with what Jumah was doing. And I guess that's a smart thing, because he wouldn't be able to keep up with what Jumah is a naturally faster guy, a naturally more mobile guy, a smaller guy. So for Riakporhe to try and keep up with what Jumah was doing, it probably would have given Jumah opportunities to hit Riakporhe even more than he did. So I guess that's a smart thing. He showed patience in there, poise, the timing, you know, for certain shots, and of course the body shot that ended the fight. So I don't want to be too critical of Richard Riakporhe. I'm just saying what I see. He is still apparently talking about this Lawrence Okolie fight. Well, he was asked about it in an interview and he said, yeah, you know, that would be a big fight at the O2 and what have you. From what I've seen of Richard Riakporhe so far in his career, including this fight here against Jumah, I don't see him beating Lawrence Okolie at this stage. But I understand why he's calling for it in retrospect. You know, in previous videos, I was thinking, okay, he's ambitious and everything, calling for a fight with Lawrence Okolie, but really and truly, he needs a lot more development before he can get in there with him. But on reflection, I can understand it more now because of the fact that Richard Riakporhe is actually older than Lawrence Okolie. Riakporhe, I believe, is 31 or 32. Lawrence Okolie's like 28 or 29. So, and Okolie's already, of course, a world champion with a couple of defenses under his belt. So, yeah, you can see why Riakporhe will be trying to have that fight sooner rather than later, because the clock is ticking for him. Now, he is a cruiserweight, of course, and bigger guys, cruiserweights, heavyweights, do tend to age a bit slower than smaller guys, so they tend to have a longer shelf life at the top, top of the sport. So he may have that on his side, but again, looking at Richard Riakporhe, he doesn't appear to be a guy who is particularly gifted athletically, at least in a boxing sense. Yeah, he's got punching power, but you don't see, you know, fluidity there. You don't see any great speed there or any great agility or anything like that. If anything, I would say Lawrence Okolie comes across as more of an athlete than Richard Riakporhe. And I know Okolie is more ungainly than Riakporhe. Riakporhe is, I guess, more textbook and methodical, and his punches look more correct at times than Lawrence Okolie. But Okolie has more speed. When Okolie whips that right hand in, it comes in very fast at times, much quicker than Richard Riakporhe's right hand. Also, Okolie has a bit more fluidity to him. Even though he looks clumsy at times, you go back and look at that fight he had against Glavatsky. He was fluid in there. Dare I say, he was kind of slick in there against Glavatsky. And he was setting his shots up real well, moving real well, upper body movement, you know, tucking his chin behind his shoulder, Philly shell style, all that kind of stuff. You don't see that kind of thing from Riakporhe. So I think that Lawrence Okolie is actually the better athlete. Also, even though they're both 6'5", Okolie, I think, has the longer reach. On BoxRec, it has Riakporhe's reach listed at 77 inches, and Okolie's is something like 82, I believe. And that's reach, not arm length. But even when it comes, even when it comes to arm length, Okolie appears to have an advantage there as well. The advantage that Riakporhe may have is when it comes to the short right hand, because his short right hand is really quite formidable. Whereas Lawrence Okolie doesn't shorten his right hand up as well. There isn't as much power on the short right hand for Okolie as there is for Riakporhe, at least not in my estimation. Okolie really needs more extension on his right hand, and that's why he's better at long range than Riakporhe is. So yeah, I can't take nothing away from Riakporhe targeting that fight at 31, 32 years of age. He's trying to get a move on, but I wouldn't be picking him over Lawrence Okolie at this stage. I don't know about you guys, but as I said in a video a couple days ago, Okolie has never had a fight where he didn't look in control. Can you name me a fight where Okolie didn't look in control? Riakporhe's had several fights like that where you're not even sure if he's going to win the fight. Do you know them ones where it's like 50-50? Is he even going to win this? And he's had to dig it out the fire, right? He's had to snatch, I don't want to say snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, but he's been in very competitive situations where victory was far from certain. Let's just put it that way. Whereas with Lawrence Okolie, every fight this guy's had, there was no point in the fight where you were doubting that he was going to win. Do you know what I mean? He just has a way of dominating his opponents to such a degree. We haven't seen that from Richard Riakporhe. That doesn't necessarily mean that Riakporhe can't beat him and that Riakporhe has no chance, but it certainly gives me a lot more confidence that Okolie would beat Riakporhe at this stage. Not just that, not just the fact that Okolie has this track record of basically dominating everybody he fights, but the other things I talked about, the experience of Okolie, the longer reach. Even though they're both 6'5", he appears to have a longer reach, and he certainly gets more extension on his punches. There's a bit more slickness there, a bit more speed in the right hand, a bit more athleticism. So yeah, I'd pick Lawrence Okolie there. Riakporhe also talked about maybe getting a unification if he can get a title off somebody else. And I do think that a good route to go at this point would be to try and target Mr. Makabu. I think that would be a good way. That's all dependent on whether Makabu is still being lined up as an opponent for Canelo Alvarez, because Alvarez is supposed to fight Gennady Golovkin sometime this year. And after that, they're then looking at, assuming he gets past Bivol, of course, after that, then they're then looking at an opponent for the winter. And Makabu's name was still being floated around, although Eddie Hearn's got some of his fighters as well that he's hoping to push Canelo's way. You know, Canelo likes to beat Eddie Hearn's fighters up, even though Canelo himself, at least for a couple fights, is an Eddie Hearn fighter now at the moment. So yeah, we'll see what happens with Makabu, but I think that would be a good shout for Richard Riakporhe to try and go in there against Makabu and see if he can win that fight, because I think that's more winnable for him at this stage than Lawrence Okolie. And if he can get that, then the Okolie fight makes perfect sense as a unification, a big British domestic world title fight. It would definitely sell out the O2. You got Lawrence Okolie from Hackney, you got Riakporhe from South London, I believe he's from Woolworth. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about it all in the comments below. If you're tired of the biased narratives and mass censorship on mainstream platforms, and you want to be part of a community of critical thinkers who love free speech just as much as you do, then come and join me on Patreon and access my weekly no-holds-barred, censorship-free podcast where we lift the lid on a wide variety of controversial topics. It's not mainstream friendly, it's not politically correct, but that's the whole point. We dare to stand as a beacon of reason against an army of insanity. Just head on over to my Patreon page and select the tier called Hatman Hot Topics. You'll gain access to a minimum of 2 hours of exclusive content every single week, including podcasts, videos, interviews, live stream Q&As, as well as my popular Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. Not to mention a vast back catalogue of hundreds of hours of previous episodes. You can listen via the Patreon app with the option to download in high-quality MP3. We've also got an Element group where you can come and chat and hang out with myself and other members. Unlike Discord, it has full end-to-end encryption, is decentralized, and is 100% censorship-free. You can also send voice notes as well as much larger audio and video files than you can on Discord. So come and sign up on Patreon. There's no contract, there's no commitment, you can cancel at any time, and it's cheaper than a cup of coffee. So I'll see you over there. I'm out.